Today we're going to take a look at Wardogs. This is a brand new, recently announced all-out warfare game that's releasing in early access later this year. It is being developed by Bulkhead, and if that name sounds vaguely familiar, you might know them for a small game called Battalion 1944. That game was a World War II Call of Duty clone that was made for $10, $15, $20, and it was built more to be on a competitive side and kind of do the competitive arcade arena shooter thing. Unfortunately, shortly after release, the game kind of fell apart, and the developers were never really able to make the game function the way it should have, and it lost all its players and it died a slow death. So, being unable to bring that game back to life, the developers have moved on for years at this point, and now they're back with Wardogs, a much larger, much more ambitious game, where there are 3 teams on a large map with about 100 players all fighting for one objective, King of the Hill style. And that objective will move from place to place as the game continues. However, there is an additional catch, or twist in this case, which is that there is in-game currency that you earn with your actions. You use this currency to buy your loadout, your weapons, your ammo, and anything else that you need to put on you, which means you have to make the most you can with every life in order to buy back anything that you've been using with the next time you respawn. And personally, I do like this twist, but we'll have to talk about that in a little more detail later on in this video. As far as the gameplay itself, it is all-out warfare, so there will be tanks, helicopters, vehicles, transports, and anything and everything in between, probably more sometime after launch, we'll have to see. And at first glance, you may look at this game and figure that it's going to play like Arma or Squad, but that's not necessarily the case. The developers are making it known that they want the game to play or feel like a hardcore game, but without all of the hardcore jank. So it may look like Arma, it may look like Squad, but it should play something closer to like Insurgency Sandstorm, for instance, something that is more tactical and hardcore and fast-paced, but at the same time you're probably not going to be slide canceling or jumping around and doing all these other things that you would in a regular arcade arena shooter. Along with keeping things simple, there is no bleed out mechanic, so you can take a shot and keep fighting, and eventually go back and heal yourself. You don't have to worry about bleeding to death in the middle of a gunfight. And when it comes to the in-game currency system, it's not just about getting kills. It's about capturing the objective, holding the objective down, reviving your teammates, and doing a number of other passive things that benefit your team overall. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and talk about what I think is more important, which is all of my concerns. And in short, it's everything. How easy is it going to be for players to farm currency? Will there be exploits or other ways that players can play that are not really beneficial, but they're still getting paid to do it? We don't want to see this kind of currency just end up being useless because everyone is able to just cheese their way into 100,000, whatever, basically have infinite cash, and now the currency doesn't really mean anything. And while we're talking about the currency, I do think it's a great idea. I think in concept it's a great idea because it forces everyone to play a role in order to gain back the cash that they've used in order to spawn back in. Of course, you're still going to have people who are going to troll and use the bare minimum, but in any case, anyone who actually wants to use the weapons that are in the game, they have to actually be useful. That may mean that they just have to sit back with a medkit and heal everyone, but I prefer people to do that if they can't hit their shots and be able to take part and play the game. At the same time, they'll be benefiting everyone else who's trying to hit their shots and going into these gunfights, and they can take all the risk, while the people who are healing can earn all the cash from keeping the team alive. But that only works if there's limited currency. If I earn 10,000 alive and only takes 5,000 to build a kit, then I'm always going to end up with a net positive in my account. I'm never going to go anywhere near the red because I'm always coming out with 10,000 each time. And while the game is going into early access and all this is going to be balanced on the fly, of course, because there's no way to bulletproof test this thing until you have hundreds of thousands of players playing the game, I don't think the currency is going to end up being that big of a deal, 2 months into the game. Pretty much by that time, everyone's going to have a ton of income stashed in their in-game account that this currency isn't really going to matter. And I feel there needs to be some deterrent to that. I don't think you'll want to have players to be able to bankroll their account into the millions 4 weeks after launch and basically get to do whatever they want anytime after that. That may mean that you have to limit players as to how much they can actually take in per game. So yeah, you may have 1 million stacked up, but you can only take 10,000 to spawn in. And I think that can very much benefit the game overall and prevent players from using basically like quote unquote endgame gear, using the best gear possible, and suffer 0 penalty from that. In this case, if you're stuck spawning in with 10,000, then you have to build up the amount you have within that game until you're able to buy all of that in-game gear. So a soft cap to essentially buy in to the server would probably help the game a lot to prevent this currency from being completely useless, 3-4 weeks after the launch. And now let's go into some of the biggest concerns that I have. First and foremost, the netcode and the server tick rates. Fortunately, the developers are going to be providing private servers or the ability to buy into private servers, so the community can run their own servers. That probably means they can run a higher tick rate server than what will be normal. However, no matter how high a server tick rate is, it does not account for bad netcode and desync. So that netcode and that desync needs to be sorted out during the early access phase. It is a tall ask, especially for a smaller studio like Bulkhead, and when development studios like Activision and DICE are not able to resolve that in their own games, Battlefield 6 and Call of Duty 7 and Warzone, and they all suffer from desync and they all suffer from netcode. Apex Legends suffers from desync and hit reg. All of these games suffer from the same thing. No one's been able to really find the black magic to make netcode work the way it should, except with a very small exception of games like Valorant maybe, and maybe the higher tick CSGO servers. That's about it. Anything outside of those two games, it's pretty much desync and hit reg city. We can talk about Overwatch or Rivals, but I think those games are chaotic enough and open enough map-wise that whatever desync is happening, it's not so drastic because of the long time to kill that it doesn't really tend to affect the game overall in the long run. However, when we're talking about tactical shooters where every bullet counts and you have very limited movement capabilities, not being able to get behind a wall because of desync is going to kill way more players than it needs to. And this was a big issue as well back when XDefiant was a game, even during the open betas that they had and they were testing out the netcode, and they were just never able to get it right, and the game pretty much died. Not because of skill-based matchmaking, but just because the game kept breaking with every update, and that included the netcode. Again, private servers will help a lot, but it's not going to help if the netcode is bad. Speaking of things that are just unavoidable, the anti-cheat. Where there are going to be cheaters, there are going to be people who will exploit the game. Fortunately, because there will be private servers that players can most likely police themselves, this won't be as big of an issue for a lot of the community, and by a lot, I probably mean like a fraction of the community. Unfortunately, the landscape for online gaming has changed drastically. I doubt a lot of players are going to go out of their way to look for these private servers. So yes, there would have to be a server browser that the game supports, but I think the majority of players, they're just going to load up the game, hit the quick play button, and launch into an official server. And if the anti-cheat is bad, then they're going to be running to a server where half the players are cheating and the other half are using in-game exploits. And that's not a good look for the game, and you don't want the first time experience of your players to be going into servers that are loaded with cheaters. Again, private servers will help a lot, but it is going to be more word of mouth that, hey, never play on the official servers, which is a bad look for the development team, but to only play on these private servers, and these are the few that you can join in on. And if you do well in those, and so long as you're not cheating in those, you don't get caught cheating in those, then you can keep playing on those private servers for however long you want. While I doubt that the development team is going to have a great option for anti-cheat, I do hope that they can do their best to have a reactive and proactive anti-cheat system and help filter out those cheaters so that their regular official servers are worth playing on, at least for a first-time player. And that for everyone else who actually says, yeah, I love this game, I enjoy it, I'm going to keep playing it, they can all then hop onto a private server where there's going to be a lot more security, because generally the admins in those private servers are going to ban any bad actors, anyone who's using exploits or cheating, and eventually you'll have servers that are made up mostly of legitimate players and daily players that come over because they realize and they know that they keep joining this private server, they're not going to have to deal with any cheater. And then going into the actual gameplay of it all, we don't know what the time to kill is going to be like. I'm sure the time to kill is going to be quick, but quick could be 5 bullets with an AR, it could be 6, it could be 1 shot to the head, it could be 2 shots to the head, we don't know. So we'll have to see when we get to play this game just how much the time to kill is. there will be different ammo types, there will be different types of armor. So with that, the time to kill is not going to be that consistent. I would imagine high-powered, 7.62 rifles, a high-powered DMR, those will probably be the weapons that you want to rely on. And anything below that, unless you're using some type of specialized ammo, it will still be good. It all depends on where the time to kill is, with or without armor. These smaller hitting weapons may be more of just like land your headshots and you'll be good. But if you're relying on body shots, you'll want to have your harder hitting weapons. And while we're on the topic of weapons and gunplay, from the clips that I was able to see, the weapon recoil appears to be weak. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's hard to tell just by watching gameplay. This is something that we would have to play and get on a server and see what's going on. I do see a little bit of push and pull from the recoil, but I don't see it to be so drastic or incremental. It does look like the weapon becomes fairly easier to shoot the longer you're holding down the trigger. But there are so many questions in terms of how the gunplay is going to work. Is it where your crosshair is? Is that where the bullet's going? Is it going to have bloom like Battlefield does? Is the recoil pattern random, or is the recoil pattern consistent? We have to know what all these things are, because a combination of these things is going to make the game feel very inconsistent, and then a different combination of these mechanics are going to make the weapons feel like lasers, with or without attachments. What I can say as a positive to the gunplay, there is very little visual recoil, and that is a really good thing. I don't want my weapon to look like I'm shooting fireworks like I did back in Modern Warfare 2. And again, looking at these clips, we see a lot of the gameplays using iron sights, and it is fairly clean gameplay. And if you're going to ask me which one I prefer, weapons that are wildly inaccurate and inconsistent, or weapons that are too consistent, I would rather have weapons be a little too consistent. Because anything that feels random is going to make it feel like every gunfight's a coin flip. Because I'm expecting the recoil pattern to work one way, and then it works another. So I do want the recoil to be there. I do want a good amount of recoil kick. I want it to be the point where you want to shoot in 4 or 5 bullet bursts, rather than just holding down the trigger for most of these weapons. But again, we won't really know until we get to play the game ourselves. And while we're speaking about game balance, because it is all-out warfare, there will be vehicles and artillery and helicopters and tanks to worry about. Will these tanks feel like they're made out of paper mache and die in 1 or 2 shots like in new Battlefield 6? Or will these vehicles feel like mini-bosses and take several launchers in order to bring down? I would assume, due to the currency system, it is going to be likely that these vehicles will have a fair amount of health in order to provide the player enough time to gain enough currency to want to buy back in. And I think that's the other thing to ask is, when you're buying back in, what do you need to buy if all you're going to do is drive tanks, and you don't expect to play as actual infantry? Perhaps there will be something like a repair tool or a repair kit that you would have to buy back in with every single time, unless you just want to run a tank without one for some whatever reason. So we'll have to see how that plays out. And with the release of all of this information, we did get a few clips of gameplay without any extra audio or music in the background. And in terms of the audio design, I do like it. But I do want to give everyone a heads up that it does feel like it's going to be a little bit bass heavy. If you are using bass heavy headphones, this game is going to rock you, which may be what you're looking for. But for everyone else who's using a somewhat more balanced headset, you probably want to bring your bass boost back down a little bit whenever you're playing this game, because it might make the game sound a little more muddier than what it actually is. Of course, with this being all early access, all of this can change. Who knows where this audio balance is going to be between now and 6 months, a year from now. And the only other concern that I want to bring up is I really do hope that there will be some alternative game modes that they're willing to bring in over time. Maybe not during the early access phase, but sometime after the main release, to bring in a few smaller game modes. And if they decide that they're not going to do that, I hope they give the community some tools to create some smaller game modes themselves. And the reason why I say that is because if the gameplay is good, if the netcode is good, if the time to kill feels good, if the weapon balance feels great, if the vehicle balance feels great, then you don't just have a game anymore, you have a platform that players can jump back into and play a number of different game modes on and enjoy it because everything about the game feels great. It's why we have Call of Duty, we have Call of Duty Ground War, and we have DMZ, and then we have Warzone, and we have Resurgence, and all these other game modes. Even though the main core Call of Duty game technically is the arena game modes, they were able to evolve out of that into Battle Royale. And it's not to say that I want a Battle Royale out of Wardogs, but I may want a 5v5, 10v10 smaller style game mode, one where you're fighting against 3 objectives and having limited respawns. Something that feels more competitive and something that fits more of that Counter-Strike mold where you are buying your weapons and your gear round after round unless you are able to live from round to round. I do hope the best for Wardogs and for Bulkhead, and I hope they're able to nail as many of these things as possible and provide the tools necessary to keep this game going from early access to release and beyond. And that's all I have to say about Wardogs for now. I am going to be keeping a close eye on it, and I really do want to get my hands on it as soon as I possibly can to see how it's going to play. I really hope it doesn't disappoint because we do need another FPS game in the space. I know a lot of people think we don't. But if this one does hit, it would easily fit within the top 10 FPS games that are available because there are only like 7 or 8 of them right now. And those 7 or 8 games play completely different from one to the other. So you may like one game, you may not like the other, and if you don't like any of them, then you're just kind of stuck playing indie games. Let's hope that Wardogs can impress. Let's hope that Bulkhead can deliver. Let me know what you guys think about the game, and if you are enjoying these videos and my breakdown of this, consider subscribing to the channel. I have a number of different videos on my channel. This isn't the only one. I know YouTube may try to make you think that this is the only video on my channel. It's not. So go ahead and check out anything else, and that'll be it. So until then, I am Mr. Rain, and I'll see you next time.